What's up YouTube, Dal here from Zephyr War Games, and today I am bringing you my top 10 best side deck cards for the December all the way into possibly March format. So what I'm going to be doing with this is I did compete in a weekend extravagance as well, and taking into account all of the decks that are topping and doing incredibly well on the online events, I've created a list going in rank of 10 to 1 of my personal kind of opinions towards certain cards I think may actually help you, and taking into account how effective they are across a board of decks, how effective they are against the top 3 decks, and how budget friendly they are as well. So I've tried to keep everything involved, and I will try and offer you guys budget options to any of those particular cards that are of extortionate prices and as close as you possibly can get. Before we get started as well, I also found out that they sell Christmas t-shirts of pretty much me, a little bit hairy, but yes, it is the Christmas period. I'm not too sure exactly what date this is coming out, but regardless, Merry Christmas to every single one of you. All we do wish you all of the best of happy holidays, leading in these difficult times and leading into the whole new year as well. With all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe so you do not miss out on any more Yu-Gi-Oh content for the rest of 2020 and moving into 2021. Now, let's start off with this list, and we'll start off at 10. And number 10, of course, is Droll and Lockbird. Now, the reason it is so far down this list is on pure experience and the way that it works. When you actually look at the top 3 decks, looking at Zoo Eldritch, you're looking at Virtual Worlds, and you look at Drytrons as well, looking on the border edge of being competitive. Now, Droll and Lockbird on the other end of the spectrum is actually very, very good in a sense against more rogue decks. You look at Dinos, you drop a Droll and Lockbird on a Dino, they are in incredible trouble. You also look at stuff like Artifact Lancer as well, which can kind of be very, very useful against dinos, but isn't so great against everything else. So the reason Droll and Lockbird is further down this list is it will pretty much turn off a Drytron turn. Unless they've got the components that they need, and unless the first search they make is to get to that Vanity's Fiend, it will turn off their plays. So that is why it's incredibly good against them. However, you look at Zoo Eldritch, you look at Virtual World, it's not so great. Yes, if you were to do it on something prior to the Lulu, they are in a bit of trouble because they kind of want the Lulu to get that additional search. So if they were to activate the spell card, banish, search out Lulu, and then you draw and Lockbird them, that will put them in a bit of a sticky situation. However, they still are able to play through it, which is why, in my opinion, it's not at the number, it's not higher up the list. You look at Zoo Eldritch as well, probably a little bit irrelevant because in the end phase they're going to chain their trap cast to get them the sets, so they're not really going to add a lot, and the Zoos don't add a lot of themselves either, so it's not really that good of a side deck card, which is why it's gone further down the list. Now, this list is also taking into consideration cards that should be mained. So you look at stuff like Infinite Impermanence, Ash Blossoms, Ghost Ogres, Effect Veilers. To be totally honest, the only ones out of that list you should probably be maining is probably along the lines of Imperm and Ash Blossoms. Ghost Ogre comes down to personal preference, and so does Effect Veiler on personal preference and what you have available to you. Moving on to number 9 in the list, we're going with Kaijus, we're going with Sphere Modes and Lava Golems. Now, the reason these are on the list but not as high up the list is purely because they're a little bit slow. So in the sense that you look at Drytrons. So if you were to go against Drytron, they'll probably end their board on a Vanity's Fiend, and the next turn they're probably going to kill you. They might put an Natasha on there at some point. However, if they just end on a Vanity's Fiend, you can't Kaiju them, you can't Sphere Mode them, you can't Lava Golem. It's a dead card. You look at stuff like Zodiacs. Now, Zodiac with the Eldritch is going to have all the Eldritch backing up a Zeus on the possibilities. Even if they don't have a Zeus, they'll have a Dryden. So a Kaiju is good to get rid of that Dryden. A Sphere Mode is less relevant because they're not going to really pump their board for the 3 monsters, and a Lava Golem again is less relevant because they're not going to pump their board for the 2 monsters on a consistent basis. There might be the odd times you can do it, but you also have to keep in mind that with Sphere Mode and with Lava Golem, you can't use your normal summon for that turn, so your deck then relies on what you are playing. You then go into Virtual Worlds as well. Now with Virtual Worlds, they're probably the prime candidate for something like Ra Sphere Mode because they will put 3 monsters on the board sometimes. So their best board is going to be double VFD plus a Nyam Nyam, which is going to lock out your entire grave. So looking on that kind of perspective, then your best kind of option would be the ability to Ra Sphere Mode them. Lava Golem again is also quite useful as well because 9 out of 10 they will do VFD plus either a second VFD or a Nyam Nyam, depending on how good their hand has been. A Kaiju, again, in my opinion, is a little bit too slow because all of these cards you're going to drop on your opponent, you will be under VFD already. Now, they might wait till the main phase and you go, right, okay, turn player priority Kaiju. But then if you've got second VFD, doesn't matter. If they've got one VFD and they wait that long to try and dodge the gamma, then you'll be in an okay position, but they'll still have the ability to come back. You have also got to keep in mind that the card you're giving your opponent is, in a way, a bit of a blocker. You give them a Lava Golem, you're giving them a 3k beater. You give them a Kaiju, you're giving them a 2k 200 beater, anywhere up. So it really depends on your deck. It is kind of useful, but it is very specific on the matchups and why it is further down the list. Moving on to number 8, we've got Triple Tactical Talents. Now again, the reason I've put this in here is it is very expensive, okay? It's expensive, rightfully so, because it is an incredibly good card. Now you look at stuff like if they were to, if Virtual World VFD you can then activate Triple Tactical Talents and either take control of a monster to get rid of it, or of course you can draw 2 cards to bring in more outs or more disruptions during your opponent's turn. Again, depending on the type of deck that you are specifically playing, will then adapt to what you are going to be siding in. Zoo Eldritch, they would have to trigger the Zeus effect already, and then you would trigger Triple Tactical Talents to either take Zeus or take one of the Golden Lords, and then be able to do effects from that point on, or then get rid of them. So again, it is a little bit slow, which is why it's further down the list, but the draw cards are still going to be incredibly useful for you. Then take into consideration the last one of Drytrons. They're not actually going to activate monster effects during your turn. The chances are they're going to be using Natasha to loop life points and get an OTK to climb into access code while you're under Vanity's Fiend, or they're going to be able to pretty much end on Vanity's Fiend and not going to activate an effect, so you're not going to be able to tactical talents them anyway, which is again why it's further down the list. Moving on to number 7, we do have Evenly Matched. Now, going back quickly, sorry, on tactical talents, there isn't really a budget option for this, but what I'm trying to say is it's not that high up the list. The only ones you want to worry about are anything on the list from 5 upwards if you need a budget alternative. Triple Tactical Talents, there isn't really anything that gives you all 3 of what that card provides you, sadly. So you could probably put in like a Mind Control to give you that kind of aspect of it, but then everything else is a little bit different. Moving on to number 7, we've got Evenly Matched. Now, Evenly Matched, fingers crossed we're going to get another reprint of it, but we do not know as of yet. But the reason Evenly Matched is on this list is purely because you look at Virtual Worlds, you look at Eldritch, and you could possibly maybe look at Drytron, but less so. All of the boards that are being ended on are going to be more than one monster or more than one card. So being able to drop an Evenly Matched on your opponent will clear their entire board off, leaving them with one monster. Now the issue is, if you do it to a Virtual World player, they'll probably leave their VFD. They'll probably already turn you off for a turn, they'll bring the VFD back the next turn, or they might leave the Nyam Nyam because you're turned off and everything going from the field to the grave is banished instead. You look at the Eldritch. Now, they will probably hurt the Eldritch Zoo the most because they will lose not only their Zeus, if Zeus is on there, or Trident, but they'll also lose their trap cards. The chances are they'll probably try to chain their trap cards, try to pop their own trap cards to make sure that they end up in the grave rather than being banished. But again, it's very, very nice at clearing board. Drytron, again, they're not really pumping the board full of loads of cards, so an Evenly Matched isn't going to be as effective, which is why it's on the further end of this list. Moving swiftly on to number 6, we've got Cosmic Cyclone. Now, arguably Cosmic Cyclone could go higher up the list. The reason it's further down the list is because it is very specific. It's very powerful at what it does do, but it is very specific. Now, your alternative options to something like Cosmic Cyclone are going to be stuff like MSTs, Twin Twisters. The idea of back row hate. Now, the reason we've gone with Cosmic Cyclone is purely because of the banish ability. Now, banish ability and the fact that it's a quick play gives you effects to trigger during your opponent's turn and to trigger during your turn. Sometimes being able to activate Cosmic Cyclone during your main phase is incredibly powerful. Not only can it take away the Phantom Knight quick launch or the Phantom Knight rank up spell, but it can also take away the trap card for Virtual Worlds. It can also take away any of the trap cards for Eldritch or their Eldritch Golden Land, and that straight away makes their turn crumble. Again, it's less effective against Drytrons because they're not really going to be pumping the board for the back row. They're not really going to be pumping the board for the cards that are going to stay on the board that you're going to get rid of. Maybe their field spell, but anything else than that, it's not really going to be as effective as it can everywhere else. Still an incredibly good card, and it's probably one of them cards that you would either main or definitely side, in my opinion. Moving on to our top 5. Now, this is where it comes down to the crunch list of the 5. And we're going to start off with, of course, Nibiru. Now, the reason Nibiru is at number 5 is because, again, looking at the certain decks you might face. So Virtual Worlds, if they wanted to play it a particular way, can dodge Nibiru by going into Gossip Shadow, or they go into VFD and they use VFD during their turn to stop you playing Nibiru. Nonetheless, if you do open Nibiru, you can really, really hurt a Virtual World, which is why, in my opinion, it's still a card worth playing. Again, against Zodiac as well, unless they play a little bit more reserved and don't want to give Zeus all of the materials, they are going to be making Zeus their 5th summon. So Nibiru will clear them off, and that is one big threat that you don't have to worry about. You look at road decks like Dinos, and you look at Drytrons as well. So Dinos will definitely run into it, but they're probably going to have a miscellaneous. And then you look at Drytrons will definitely run into it, but they also have the ability to hold back if they want to, and goes Vanity's Fiend early on, and Vanity's Fiend completely shuts you out from doing that. Nibiru is still very effective against all 3 of the top main decks that I'm talking about. It's also very effective against the lower level decks as well, but it really depends on how far ahead the player is thinking. If they know Nibiru is a massive weakness of the deck, they can actually make it more of a brick for you than an issue for them if they have the ability to get into a negate prior to that, and then it's a dead card. So that is why it sits at the mid-table and no further up. Moving on to number 4, we've got Forbidden Droplet. Now again, with Droplet, there isn't really a exact copy for it. The reason that Forbidden Droplet is so good is because it's a quick play. It allows you to turn multiple cards off and negate their effects, and it allows you to keep playing. Now, when you're against Zoo Lich, you're probably only going to want to turn off 1 card, and that's going to be their Zeus. When you're against Virtual Worlds, you're probably only going to want to turn off their VFDs and their Nam Nams, but the issue with that is by the time you've been able to activate your Droplet, you need to send from hand if they've, send from field if they've got the Nam Nam on board, because you can't send from your hand. Meaning that by the time you try to trigger Forbidden Droplet, they would have already VFD'd you, and you kind of want to hope that they don't have a Nam Nam in play. Then looking, of course, at Drytrons, just a single 1 card off of the Virtual World, off of the Forbidden Droplet, turns off their Vanity's Fiend, and it allows you to go through. The other thing that Droplet has over most of the others, which is why it's further up the list, is because it can be a defensive card as well. If you were to set a monster and then set Droplet and set some other cards, you pass your opponent's turn. If they cannot clear off the cards, you can flip Droplet during the damage step to make sure that your opponent takes damage, or you can also make sure that your opponent is not strong enough to get past the board you're trying to build. So in that opinion, it is very, very good. It is higher up the list. It is expensive. The closest alternative you have for it is Dark Ruler No More. And the only reason you'd be playing Dark Ruler No More is if you're playing the ability or the type of deck that allows you to turn off a Virtual World board and then pick it apart bit by bit with spells and traps, rather than picking it apart with your monster effects, because they will be under VFD. It's very rare that your opponent might wait till main phase, but then if you combo off your Dark Ruler No More with a Gamma, you will be able to turn it off like that, and then you're good to go. But again, keep in mind, the Virtual World Strongboard right now is Nam Nam plus 2 VFDs, so they'll be able to get past at least 1 Gamma. Moving on to number 3, so this is where it gets really, really important. So number 3 is Gamma, so Cyclone Gear Gamma. Now, I used to personally I didn't like this card at all. I didn't like the fact you had to play a brick. I didn't like the fact that once you've used it once, the chances are you're not going to be able to use it again. But when looking at it, the amount of cards, and especially when you're looking at Virtual Worlds and you're looking at Drytrons and you're looking at Zoo Lich, they're going to trigger card effects while you don't have any monsters. So the VFD, they want to try and trigger it as early as they possibly can. You look at Drytrons. The fact that you can drop a Gamma during your opponent's turn and during your turn, you're able to protect your spells that you want to play that require you to not have monsters. So stuff like Extravagance, stuff like specific field spells like Mist in Mine if you want to lock your opponent out. And then other cards as well, like Drytron Nova if you're playing Drytrons, Virtual World, Quinlong, anything like that. It gives you the ability to protect. So it's a protector and an aggressor, and the best thing about it is Gamma can hit anything, anywhere. So any monster, anywhere, whether it activates on the field, on the hand, or in the graveyard, you can stop it. Which means you can stop your opponent's Lulu, you can stop your opponent's, the one in the grave, I can't remember its name, the one that comes back from the grave. You pretty much stop any monster effect happening anywhere, which is why Gamma is so far up the list, and the fact that it's had a rare printing also makes it a little bit cheaper and easier for everyone to get hold of. Moving on to number 2. Now this one just missed out on the top spot, very, very surprisingly, by 1 card. And literally, this is any kind of graveyard disruption. So in the event that we played at the weekend, we played the DD Crow rule that if a card was resolved on a separate chain and you were to DD Crow it, it would no longer resolve because it's no longer where it started to. So for example, if you DD Crowed a Ben 10 that was tributed, the Ben 10 effect wouldn't go through. That being said, stuff like DD Crow, Skullmeister, and Ghost Bell, more so Skullmeister because it is on a once per turn, more so DD Crow when that new ruling comes in, is all incredibly powerful and important because not only can they hit specific monsters, but they can also hit spells and traps, which means you can hit Golden Lords, you can hit any of their Eldritch spells and traps, you can hit the Virtual World spell, you can hit the Virtual World trap, you can hit the level 3 in the graveyard that wants to come back. You can do stuff with dinos, you can do stuff with Drytrons, because Drytrons like to put their rituals in the graveyard. They like to then, for example, the Benten, but they also like to bring cards back as well. So they put a Drytron in the graveyard and they need 2 Drytrons to get going. If you take away the Drytron in the grave, it can't use this effect to tribute the one on field or in hand and then bring itself back. So stuff like DD Crow, Meister and Bell can be very important to stop the graveyard effect. You all have a very ranged variety of prices on there as well. So Skullmeister has a common and a super and a secret. Ghost Bell has had reprints as alternates, gold, everything. And DD Crow is, I'm pretty sure, a common, a super, a ultra and an ultimate. So you have the full aspects of everything you want to get. So now before we get on to number 1, an honourable mention to a card called Mystic Mine. Now the reason Mystic Mine floats around the list but didn't actually get onto the list is purely because it is very specific. It is specific in the sense that you need to be able to play a field spell, because you don't want to play Mystic Mine and not be able to get rid of it yourself when the time is ready. Mystic Mine is also very good in a deck that plays a specific boss monster that can clear an entire board, in the example of Dinos. Now again, as I've said previous on my videos, I do not and will never encourage people to play Mystic Mine Burn or Mystic Mine Deck Out. I do encourage people to play Mystic Mine as a defensive option, because in this current format, when my opponents have been able to go Nam Nam plus 2 VFDs, and all you've opened up with is a Cosmic Cyclone and a Mystic Mine, and everything else is a little bit dead under those scenario, you can go Cosmic Cyclone, get rid of the trap, play Mystic Mine. They're shut for a turn because they then need to get Quinlan in order to, or Quinlan to get the trap card to then pop the Mystic Mine. So you want to make sure that Mystic Mine is a defensive option that also allows you to play under the floodgate cards that we do have with Vanity's Fiend, with Zeus, with stuff like that. You bait out Zeus or get rid of Zeus's materials, negate Zeus, anything like that, Mystic Mine, you're in a very okay position to keep playing the game. It's not as unbreakable as it once was, which is why it's further down the list, or not even on the list, but it's still a very, very good card to keep in mind. Now, number 1. This number 1 is actually going to shock quite a lot of you. It actually shocked me when I was putting the list together, and when I was actually thinking about it, ultimately, the reason that these 2 cards, and there's 2 cards on this one that are to the top of the list, is because they're budget, they're quick play, and they can out all 3 of the main decks that I'm talking about, and others on top of that. So, at number 1, I've got Forbidden Chalice and XYZ Encore. Now, before you all go mad and go, what, they're not top number 1, here are my reasons for making these number 1. I'll start with XYZ Encore. Actually, I can talk with them on both. So the idea, again, when I was thinking about this, is purely the ability of activating these cards under locked scenarios. So the idea of being able to quick play this and play it during my opponent's turn, or play it during my turn to be able to break apart my opponent's board, all in a single card, is incredibly powerful. Now, the reason Chalice is a little bit better than XYZ Encore is because Chalice will hit, of course, all of the XYZs, but it'll also hit the stuff like the Nyam Nyam as well, and can also hit the Vanity's Fiend on top of that. Yes, you do make them a little bit stronger, but as long as you can clear them off the board, you're good to go. Then obviously both of them are very budget as well, because Chalice has had 101 prints, and I'm pretty sure XYZ Encore has had like 2 or 3, but it's still very cheap to get hold of. So for those of you who don't know what XYZ Encore is, it is a quick play spell card. You target one face-up XYZ monster your opponent controls, you detach all materials from it and send it back to the extra deck. Then if there was a monster card attached to those XYZ materials, so not an XYZ monster to my understanding, so if it was Zodiac, they would only get back the monster that was used for the initial one, like Blade or Ram Ram. That will then come back to the board and its level will be reduced. Your opponent cannot respond to this card's activation, so they don't have the ability to get rid of their VFD, they don't have the ability to negate it or anything like that, which is what makes it incredibly important and powerful. The only downside is that when you're looking at floodgate monsters, of course, you are looking at stuff like Nam Nam, you are looking at stuff like VFD, and these might not be enough on their own to get you the game to play. Now, the reason, like I said, these are up the top of the list, or these are number 1 in my opinion, is because they are budget, they're easy to get hold of, they're quick plays, they can be used during both players' turn, and they actually have a range of targets they can hit. So if you were to play a rogue deck of something like Numerons, you can hit it. If you play up against at least 1 VFD, you will be able to hit it. If you come up against Zeus, you will be able to hit it without having to bait out any card effects, without having to bait out any usages from your opponent. Now again, this is just my personal opinion. Now, I personally didn't play XYZ Encore or Forbidden Chalice at the extravagance of the weekend, but when I look back in it, it would have actually been a better option for some of my other cards. So like Droplet, if I'm under Nam Nam, I can't use it. So that's where Chalice would be better, because then I can go Chalice, turn off the Nyam Nyam, then activate Droplet, and I'm good to go. So it does give you a lot to play around with, it does give you a lot to think of, and like I said, the reason it's number 1 in the list is the combination of execution, usefulness, utility, and of course the budget options for it as well. That is pretty much it for my top 10 list. So blitzing through it now, if you go back to watch the full video, you'll get my explanations of why they are. But from 10 to 1, we've got Drone Lock Bird in 10. We've got Kaiju Sphere Mode or Lava Golem in number 9. In number 8, we've got Triple Tactical Talents. In 7, we've got Evenly Matched. In 6, just missing out on the top 5, sorry, we've got Cosmic Cyclone. Then moving into the top 5, you've got Nibiru, you've then got Forbidden Droplet, you then have Gamma, and of course subsequently Driver, and then in second place was DD Crow, Skullmeister, and maybe Bell if you don't have the other two. And then in first place, in my opinion, was Forbidden Droplet and XYZ Encore, purely because of the utility that they have to use and abuse, and the targets they can out in order to allow you to play the game with the remainder of your hand, the remainder of your combo pieces, and build on from there. Anyway, thank you so much to every single one of you that managed to last throughout the entire video. If you do have any questions, let me know. If you think that I missed any tech cards that you think are really, really good this format for the side deck, then please put them down in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to look at them. And also, I'm only going to be able to expand further as well. So the more that you can present to me, the more I'll be able to learn and the more that I'll be able to feed back to you guys as well. But that was my top 10 hand traps for the December 2020 and the January 2021 format. For now, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Stay safe. And for this time, guys, as always, Happy Christmas.